The rifle range at Camp Pendleton stretched out under the California sun, a place where Marines came to prove their marksmanship and maintain the deadly skills that define their profession. It was a Saturday in August 2019, and the range was hosting an annual charity event where active duty Marines competed alongside veterans and civilians, all raising money for wounded warrior programs. The atmosphere was relaxed, almost festive, with laughter and friendly trash talk filling the air between volleys of gunfire. Among the competitors was a group of young Marines from 3rd Battalion, fresh back from deployment, cocky with the confidence that comes from surviving combat. They were good shots, legitimately skilled, and they knew it. They gathered near the 200-yard line, checking their weapons and placing bets on who would score highest. Their rifles were pristine, modern M4 carbines with advanced optics, perfectly maintained and zeroed with precision. If you believe in respecting those who came before us, no matter how they look, hit that like button. And stay until the end, because what you about to witness will humble you and remind you that experience can never be replaced by youth. At the far end of the firing line, setting up at a bench by himself, was an old man who looked completely out of place. He appeared to be in his mid-70s, thin and stooped, with gnarled hands that shook slightly as he removed a rifle from a battered canvas case. The weapon looked like it had been through a war, because it had. It was an M14, the predecessor to the M16, a rifle that had been standard issue in the early days of Vietnam. The wood stock was scratched and worn, the metal showed its age, and the whole thing looked like a museum piece that should have been retired decades ago. One of the young Marines, a corporal named Davis, noticed the old man and nudged his buddy. "Check out Grandpa over there with his antique. Thing probably hasn't been fired since the Nixon administration." His friend, Lance Corporal Martinez, laughed. "Does that dinosaur even still work? Looks like it belongs in a display case, not on a firing line." The comments weren't mean-spirited, just the casual arrogance of young men who never learn that age and treachery will always overcome youth and skill. The old man seemed not to hear them, or perhaps he heard similar comments so many times in his life that they simply rolled off him like water off wax canvas. He methodically set up his position, moving with the careful deliberation of someone whose body no longer cooperated the way it once did. A retired Marine major named Thompson, who was helping organize the event, walked over to the young Marines. His face was stern. "You boys know who that is?" Davis shrugged. "Some old guy who doesn't know when to hang it up?" Thompson's expression hardened. "That old guy is Gunnery Sergeant Robert Chun, retired. He served 3 tours in Vietnam as a scout sniper. And that broken rifle you laughing at has more confirmed kills than all of you combined will likely ever see in your entire careers." The young Marines had the decency to look uncomfortable. Martinez cleared his throat. "We didn't mean any disrespect, sir." Thompson's voice dropped to something cold. "Then I suggest you stop talking and start watching. You might learn something." Robert Chun, seemingly oblivious to the conversation happening about him, finished setting up his position. He didn't use a fancy shooting mat or the latest stabilization equipment. He simply laid out an old wool blanket, positioned himself in a prone shooting stance that had been old when he learned it 50 years ago, and began checking his rifle. His hands, which had trembled while setting up, became suddenly steady when they touched the weapon. Muscle memory from thousands of hours of practice took over, and the shaking disappeared. The range officer called the line to order. "Shooters, you have 10 rounds at 200 yards. Make them count. This is for score." The firing began, a staccato rhythm of shots as competitors engaged their targets downrange. The young Marines shot well, grouping their rounds in tight clusters near the center of the bullseye. Davis scored a 96 out of 100. Martinez managed a 94. They were good scores, nothing to be ashamed of, and they knew it. Then Robert Chun began to shoot. The first thing people noticed was the pause. Where the younger shooters fire relatively quickly, trusting their optics and their training, Chun took his time. He settled behind the rifle, his breathing slowing to something deep and rhythmic. 10 seconds passed. 20. The old M14 seemed to be an extension of his body, growing from his shoulder, like it belonged there. When he finally fired, the report was different from the sharper crack of the M4S. The M14 had a deeper, more authoritative boom, a sound from another era. Chun worked the action smoothly, ejecting the spent casing and chambering the next round with movements that were unconscious and perfect. Another long pause, another shot. He fired all 10 rounds like this, each one deliberate, each one separated by that same measured breathing, that same patient stillness. While the younger Marines had finished their strings in under a minute, Chun took almost 4 minutes to fire his 10 shots. When he was done, he engaged the safety, set the rifle down with the care one might show to a sleeping child, and slowly pushed himself to his feet. The range officer called for a ceasefire and sent runners to retrieve the targets. When they came back, Davis's target showed his 96 score, 9 rounds in the 10 ring and 1 in the 9 ring. Martinez's showed his 94, a respectable grouping by any standard. The other shooters had scored similarly, all in the 80s and 90s. Then the runner brought back Robert Chun's target. The range fell silent. All 10 rounds had gone through the exact same hole, not clustered near each other, not in a tight group, but literally through the same hole. The target looked like it had been struck once with a drill bit rather than shot 10 times. It was a perfect 100, but more than that, it was a demonstration of a level of marksmanship that most of the people on that range had only heard about in stories. Major Thompson walked over to Chun, who was carefully cleaning his rifle with an old rag. He was smiling slightly, not with arrogance, but with the quiet satisfaction of someone who just proven to himself that he could still do what he'd once done every day. "Gunny," Thompson said, shaking his head in amazement, "you want to show these young Marines how that's done?" Chun looked up, his eyes crinkling at the corners. His voice when he spoke was soft, roughened by age and cigarettes he'd quit 30 years ago. "Don't mind if I do, sir." The young Marines, all cocky confidence gone, gathered around as Chun showed them his rifle. Up close, they could see it wasn't just old, it was ancient. The barrel showed its age, the stock had been repaired multiple times, and the iron sights were worn smooth from decades of use. "This rifle," Chun said, running his hand along the stock, "is older than most of you. I carried it in Vietnam in 1967, brought it home when my tour ended, bought it from the Corps for $50 when they were surplusing them out. Haven't used anything else since." Davis, humbled, asked the question they were all thinking. "Sir, how did you do that? All 10 rounds in the same hole?" Chun smiled. "The rifle's not broken, son. It's seasoned. I know every quirk it has, every tiny variation in its behavior. I've fired tens of thousands of rounds through this barrel. I know exactly where it shoots, and I know exactly how to put it there." He paused. "You boys have fine equipment. Better than what we had in my day. But equipment is only as good as the person using it. If this story is resonating with you, please take a moment to subscribe to this channel. We share stories about skill, humility, and the lessons that only experience can teach. We honor the knowledge of those who came before and remind ourselves that mastery takes time. Your subscription helps us continue sharing these important messages." Martinez spoke up, his voice respectful now. "Gunnery Sergeant, would you be willing to teach us? Show us what you know." Chun looked at the young faces surrounding him, saw the genuine interest there, the hunger to learn that marked good Marines regardless of age. "I'd be honored to. But first, you need to understand something. What I did today, that's not about being better than you. It's about having done this one thing for 52 years. You boys are warriors. You've seen combat, done things I probably can't imagine. But shooting, precision marksmanship, that's been my whole life." He tapped the rifle. "This isn't just a weapon to me. It's a tool I've mastered, the way a surgeon masters a scalpel or a pianist masters their instrument." Over the next hour, Chun ran an impromptu class on the fundamentals of marksmanship. He talked about breathing, about how your heartbeat affects your aim, about the mental discipline required for precision shooting. He demonstrated his technique, the way he became one with the rifle, the way he could feel the shot before it happened. The young Marines watched with the intensity of students who did just realize how much they didn't know. But more than technique, Chun taught them about respect. Respect for the weapon, respect for the craft, and respect for those who come before them. He told stories about Vietnam, not the war stories they expected, but stories about other Marines he'd known about learning from older veterans who'd fought in Korea and World War II about the unbroken chain of knowledge passed down through generations. I had a mentor, Chun said, settling down the rest after the demonstration. Sergeant Major Williams fought at Iwo Jima. Meanest son of a gun you ever met, but he could shoot like he had a laser sight before laser sights existed. He taught me everything I know, and he learned from someone who fought in the trenches of France. That's how this works. Each generation teaches the next, and the knowledge grows. Davis, thoroughly humbled by the experience, spoke up. Gunny, I'm sorry for what we said earlier. About your rifle being broken, about you being too old. That was ignorant. Chun waved it off. Son, I've been getting underestimated my whole life. I'm 5'6", weigh 140 pounds soaking wet, and I'm Chinese American, which in the Corps in the 1960s meant I had to prove myself twice as hard as everyone else. He smiled, but that taught me something valuable. Never judge a book by its cover. Never assume that because something looks old or broken or different, that it doesn't have value. Some of the most powerful tools are the ones that have been tested and proven over time. The charity competition continued, but the young Marines stayed clustered around Chun, peppering him with questions, asking for advice, soaking up knowledge from someone who forgot more about marksmanship than most of them would ever learn. Chun answered every question patiently, demonstrating techniques, correcting stances, sharing the wisdom of 50 years of practice. As the day wound down, Major Thompson pulled Chun aside. Gunny, how would you feel about doing this regularly? We've got young Marines who could benefit from your knowledge. Not just marksmanship, but perspective. Understanding that experience matters. Chun looked out at the range, at the young Marines cleaning their weapons and talking among themselves, occasionally glancing his way with new respect in their eyes. I'd like that, sir. I'd like that very much. And so began an informal tradition at Camp Pendleton. Once a month, Gunnery Sergeant Robert Chun, retired, would show up at the rifle range with his battered M14 and spend the day teaching young Marines the finer points of marksmanship. But more than that, he taught them humility, respect, and the understanding that mastery is a lifelong journey, not a destination. Davis and Martinez became two of his most dedicated students. They'd arrive early to help him set up, stay late to ask questions, and over time, their own shooting improved dramatically. More importantly, they learned to look past appearances, to recognize that value doesn't always come in shiny new packages. Years later, when Davis was himself a senior sergeant training new recruits, he would tell them about the day he mocked an old man's broken rifle and how that old man had put all 10 rounds through the same hole and taught him one of the most important lessons of his career. Never underestimate someone based on their age or their equipment. The deadliest weapon on any battlefield is experience, and the wisest warriors are the ones who know they still have something to learn. Chun continued teaching until he was 83, when his health finally forced him to retire for good. At his last session at the range, over 200 Marines showed up to honor him, many of them former students who'd gone on to become instructors themselves, passing along the knowledge he'd shared. They presented him with a plaque that read, Gunnery Sergeant Robert Chun, Master Marksman, Master Teacher, Master Marine. Thank you for showing us that true skill never ages and wisdom never goes out of style. Chun stood before them, tears in his eyes, and said simply, it was my honor to serve alongside you. Remember, take care of your equipment, practice your fundamentals, and never stop learning. The moment you think you know everything is the moment you stop being a Marine. He passed away peacefully in 2024 at the age of 85. His funeral was attended by hundreds, and his old M14, the rifle people had once mocked as broken, was displayed with full military honors. Engraved on a plaque beside it were the words, "This rifle served in Vietnam, 1967 1968. It has trained Marines for over 50 years. It fired its last perfect shot on August 15, 2019, reminding a new generation that excellence is timeless. This story reminds us that we should never judge people by their appearance or their equipment. That old veteran with the ancient rifle, that elderly teacher with outdated methods, that weathered craftsman with worn tools, they might just be masters of their craft, carrying knowledge that took a lifetime to acquire. If this story humbled you or taught you something valuable, please share it with someone who needs the reminder that experience matters. Leave a comment honoring a mentor who taught you something important, or sharing a time when you underestimated someone and learned a valuable lesson.